During the process of photosynthesis, during the light-dependent reactions, light enters the thylakoid using a pigment called chlorophyll, and water enters the thylakoid and is split into electrons. These electrons are carried using NADPH and ATP to the Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma. In the Calvin cycle, carbon is fixated and enters the Calvin cycle and produces sugars and carbohydrates. And then after the electrons are taken to the Calvin cycle, ADP and NADP plus are taken back, and as a byproduct, oxygen is produced. During the electron transport chain, an enzyme called photosystem 2 splits H2O into gas, hydrogen ions, and electrons, and ADP and NADP plus is energy carriers that are converted into ATP and NADPH.
And this is the equation for photosynthesis.
In aerobic cellular respiration, where oxygen is required, in the first step, glycolysis, one molecule of glucose is converted into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm, and its output is 2 ATP, 2 NADH, pyruvate, and pyruvic acid. In the second step, or the Krebs cycle, pyruvic acid from glycolysis is broken down into carbon dioxide in a series of energy-extracting reactions. Oxygen is needed in this cycle, and it's located, and it happens in the mitochondria matrix, or the fluid part of the mitochondria. Its outputs are 2 ATP, NADH, carbon dioxide, and FADH2. In the electron transport chain, citric acid is broken down to a 4-carbon molecule. The chain happens across the inner membrane of the mitochondrion, and its outputs are 34 ATP, NADH, plus FADH, and these two goes back into the Krebs cycle and the glycolysis. Water is also produced here. Here's the overall equation for cellular respiration. In anaerobic cellular respiration, also known as fermentation and glycolysis, organisms use the fermentation in the absence of oxygen. There's 2 types of anaerobic cellular respirations, and the first one's alcoholic fermentation, where it's used by yeast and a few other microorganisms and produces SO alcohol and carbon dioxide. Here is the equation for that. And here, the other one is lactic acid fermentation, which is used by most and other organisms and converts pyruvate to lactic acid. Also used for quick, short bursts of energy. Here's the diagram of the mitochondria, and here's the diagram of how energy flows in the anaerobic cellular respiration.
So a summary of how energy flows between these 2 processes is photosynthesis produces glucose as a byproduct of the Calvin cycle, which gets its energy from the light reactions. The glucose produced is then broken down into usable energy, or ATP, through the process of cellular respiration. All 3 steps of cellular respiration work together to convert 1 molecule of glucose to 36 molecules of ATP. The ATP produced is used to run cellular processes in the cell, and that's a diagram.